Andy Card was President George W. Bush's chief of staff, of course, heavily involved in the Bush team's transition to the White House. Mr. Card, good morning. You're the perfect guest to be here this morning. Let's talk about the tone of transition before we get into the mechanics. You were there. The outgoing president really sets that tone. We've seen how President Obama has responded, and he gave a lot of credit to your boss, former President Bush, for setting a proper tone as well.
President Obama did a wonderful job yesterday, kind of beginning to heal the split in America that created wounds that are awkward. And I happen to think we celebrate our democracy by best showing that we can transfer power without being ugly. And President Obama certainly did a good job. President Bush created a good precedent. He allowed for the transitions to be done actually before the elections. There was a lot of work done. President Obama continued that tradition and actually got some support from Congress. So this year, both teams that were competing, Trump and Clinton, had transition teams that have been working since May. So there's been more groundwork done for this transition than any time in history.
I know you believe that the chief of staff job is the first one he should address. Tell me why.
Well, the chief of staff, the only bureaucracy in Washington that is not kind of dictated by Congress happens to be the bureaucracy at the White House. The president gives definition to the executive branch and to our country, and he certainly gives definition to the world about who the United States is. But the chief of staff gives discipline to the White House, and I think it's important for the president to name a chief of staff very, very early on. President Clinton, when he came to office, Mack McLarty, who was a wonderful person, was about the last person he named to be on his inner circle. And that meant most of the people in the cabinet or the White House had already been identified, and Mack didn't really have the gravitas given to him to help manage the daily operations of the White House. So I think it's important to name a chief of staff very early. It should be someone who can speak candidly to the president, speak truth to power. It should be someone who is there not to please the president, even though they serve at the pleasure of the president. They've got to tell the president what he needs to know, not necessarily what he wants to know. So even though the little piece of paper that is fancy that hangs on your wall that you all brag about, it says you serve at the pleasure of the president for the time being. It's redundant in its insecurity on purpose. But your job is not to win the president's pleasure. It's to tell the president what he needs to know to do the job.
You know, a lot of people have observed that this time of transition before January 20th and the days and months after, in some ways, the country is at its most vulnerable because you have new people coming in and learning these jobs, and everybody thinks about national security. Tell me what's done. Give some reassurance about how the new administration will be ready.
The new administration, first of all, they will be very organized and planned. They'll probably have a 100-day plan, and everything will be expected to happen click, click, click perfectly. But the reality is the world doesn't follow the 100-day plan. Something bad will happen, and someone will test us. One of our enemies will think they have a vulnerable opportunity for the United States to expose itself, and they will do something. And you have to be ready for that. You have to plan for it, but you don't have to broadcast it. But yes, on day one, the president is the president. It's not like the transition to be president is a process. No, at a moment, the president takes the responsibility, and you have to be prepared for the bad things to happen.
President Bush even implemented something, they call it a table read, almost a drill, to kind of have that new team meet with the old team so they'd be ready for anything.
President Bush, George W. Bush, did a great job of preparing the Obama incoming team with real kind of tabletop exercises about a disaster, and it was very helpful.
Andy Card, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.